The morning air was bitter in downtown Chicago, carrying the metallic tang of frost and the faint smoke of 1,000 chimneys. Inside Mercy General Hospital, the fluorescent lights hummed over the empty corridors, reflecting off the polished linoleum. Most of the staff had yet to arrive for the day shift. The silence was broken only by the occasional beep of a monitor left running from the night before. Then, a sound no one expected pierced the calm, the dragging scrape of something over tile. At first, the security guard thought it was a janitor's mop. Then the dragging grew heavier, slower, deliberate. He squinted toward the automatic doors. There, framed by the pale orange glow of the rising sun, was a small, muddy puppy. Its fur clung to its skinny frame, soaked from the frost-covered pavement outside, and its little paws slid and skidded across the floor as it dragged a black plastic bag far too large for its size. The puppy's eyes were wide, frantic but intelligent, and locked on the revolving door as if following some unseen command. A nurse pushing a cart of linens froze, hands hovering over a stack of towels. Another nurse whispered to herself, "What in God's name?" The bag moved jerkily, dragged by the determined puppy, bumping against the walls and furniture. Every so often, the plastic sagged with something heavy inside, and a dark stain spread across its black surface. No one dared approach. The hospital's sliding doors made a dull thud as the puppy slipped inside. Behind it, the city had begun to stir. Engines roared, horns honked, and the smell of exhaust mixed with winter chill. But inside, the hospital was caught in a suspended moment of shock and disbelief. "Call security," said the front desk nurse, her voice trembling. Her fingers shook as she reached for the emergency button. "No, wait, someone get Dr. Cole." Dr. Ethan Cole, a tall man in his late 30s with a sharp jawline and tired eyes, was reviewing charts in the nurse's station when the call came. He sprinted down the hall, stethoscope bouncing against his chest. The corridor seemed unnaturally long, the sound of his running shoes echoing. When he reached the entrance lobby, he stopped dead. There was the puppy, sitting obediently beside the black bag, tail tucked but still wagging faintly. Its gaze held an urgency, a silent plea. Ethan's heart skipped. Blood, or something dark and wet, was seeping from under the bag. He could hear the faint rustling from inside as if something alive stirred within. The security guard stepped forward, his hand on his baton. "Doc, maybe we should call animal control first." "Not a second," Ethan interrupted, kneeling slowly, instincts kicking in. His pulse raced. He had delivered Bobby's before. He had dealt with trauma, accidents, emergencies where seconds counted. But this felt different. Something primal told him that inside that bag was a life, fragile, vulnerable, desperate. The puppy whimpered softly, pressing against Ethan's leg as if to urge him faster. It nudged the bag forward with its wet nose. Ethan took a deep breath, gloved hands shaking slightly, and slowly cut the first strip of plastic. The bag shifted violently. The puppy yelped once, low and terrified, but did not run. Inside, Ethan saw it. A tiny bluish figure curled and shivering, a newborn. Chaos erupted, nurses screamed, security pulled back. Phones appeared, faces blurred in panic and disbelief. Ethan didn't think, he acted. He scooped the baby into his hands, checking for a heartbeat. It was faint, struggling, life clung by a thread. He called for the NICU immediately, his voice steady but urgent. "Get ready, baby, possible hypothermia, emergency." The puppy refused to leave, sitting and watching the frantic scene, eyes locked on the baby. Nurses tried to coax it away, offering towels and water, but it remained. Staff murmured, some calling it a miracle, others whispering about bad omens. One orderly knelt, murmuring, Why would someone leave a baby here?" Ethan's eyes scanned the lobby. No footprints led away. No abandoned mother. Just the puppy, the bag, and the newborn, alone in the cold winter morning. His mind raced through possibilities: kidnapping, desperate mother, human trafficking, accident. The unanswered questions pressed like bricks against his chest. Then he noticed something small and odd tangled in the puppy's collar, a white hospital wristband, faded but still legible. He tugged it free, reading the name, Maria Alvarez. Ethan's stomach sank. Maria Alvarez, a young homeless woman admitted just the night before, 8 months pregnant under observation for preterm labor. And now her baby, her life's creation, was in this lobby, saved by a puppy she had somehow trained or sent. The puppy whimpered again, nuzzling the bag, and Ethan realized with a cold shiver that it had brought the baby alone. It had navigated streets, stairwells, and sliding doors, all in the early pre-dawn. Somehow, instinct or training had guided it here, and now the most pressing question loomed. Where was the mother, and what had happened to her? Ethan called out, "Security, check every entrance, every alley, every stairwell." Phones rang, pages went out. But inside, the lobby had grown silent again, everyone frozen in awe and fear. The baby coughed weakly and the puppy barked once, high-pitched, like a warning or a plea. Ethan knew he was moments away from a revelation that would change everything. He scooped the baby tighter, wrapping it in a warm hospital blanket, feeling the fragile pulse beneath his fingers. Outside, the city woke. Inside, a tiny life waited for salvation. And somewhere beyond the hospital walls, Maria Alvarez's fate hung in the balance. The puppy's gaze met Ethan's, urgent, pleading, almost human. Then, without warning, it bolted toward the rear exit, dragging the torn bag just slightly, as if urging him to follow. Ethan froze for half a second, weighing the impossible. But instinct took over, he followed. The baby cradled against his chest, adrenaline surging as the puppy led him toward the unknown. And as he rounded the corner toward the back of the hospital, the first trail of blood on the concrete appeared, faint but unmistakable. Ethan swallowed hard. Whatever had happened here was far worse than anyone imagined. The puppy barked once more, low and insistent, before disappearing down the stairwell into the shadows. Ethan hesitated. Then, taking a deep breath, he followed, heart pounding, mind racing, aware that every second counted and that the truth waiting below could shatter everything he thought he knew about that night. The black bag shivered. Inside, the baby's tiny hands flexed weakly. Outside, the winter wind howled. And somewhere beneath the hospital, a desperate, terrified mother waited, or worse, had already vanished. The lobby fell silent once more, leaving only the echoes of footsteps and the faint whine of a muddy little hero who had already done the impossible. The elevator doors groaned as they closed, carrying Dr. Ethan Cole and the trembling puppy toward the NICU. The lobby's chaos faded behind them, replaced by the sterile, harshly lit corridors where life and death often collided in seconds. Ethan's grip on the newborn was unrelenting, feeling each tiny pulse, each irregular breath. The baby's skin was bluish, mottled, shockingly cold to the touch. His small chest heaved with a rhythm so weak it could vanish in a heartbeat. The puppy padded alongside them, tail stiff, eyes scanning every corner as if warning Ethan to stay alert. Nurses and doctors swarmed the unit, anticipating the unknown. "Prep the incubator," Ethan barked. "Warm blankets, oxygen. He's hypothermic, premature, maybe trauma. Get ready." His voice, though commanding, shook slightly. No one had seen a baby arrive in these circumstances before, dragged by a puppy across a hospital lobby, hours before his mother was found. The NICU smelled of antiseptic and humidifiers, a scent Ethan had known for years, comforting and cruel in equal measure. Machines beeped, screens flashed, and every movement felt too slow. He laid the baby gently on a warming bed. Tiny limbs flailed weakly, as if protesting their fragile state, and Ethan counted the seconds between each irregular gasp. The puppy sat down beside the incubator, nose pressed to the plexiglass, whining softly. A nurse reached out, but the puppy growled, not viciously but protectively. It was clear. This dog had already claimed this tiny life as its own. Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes scanning the monitors, trying to suppress the creeping dread. "How does something like this even happen?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Then the baby let out a gasp, a sharp, raspy sound that sent a chill down the spine of every nurse present. A moment later, another. And then, almost imperceptibly, a heartbeat steadied. The baby's chest rose and fell with slightly more strength. but it was tenuous, a threadbare victory, and every second was a gamble. Ethan's mind drifted to Maria Alvarez. The young woman had been admitted the night before, weary, scared, and unprepared for the chaos of labor. She had been monitored closely, but security reports indicated she had left her room unnoticed during the night. No alarms, no footprints, nothing, just gone. And now, somehow, a puppy had become a courier of life, dragging her newborn to the safety of the hospital while she remained missing. The thought made his chest tighten with unease. "Doc," whispered a nurse, "we need to stabilize him immediately. Hypothermia can kill in minutes at this stage." Ethan nodded. He adjusted the incubator's heat, hooked up monitors, and applied oxygen carefully. The baby's tiny fingers twitched against his chest, and he felt a wave of responsibility crash over him. This wasn't just another emergency. It was a life plucked from the edge of oblivion by a small dog, and now it rested in his hands. Hours seemed to compress into minutes. The NICU was a blur of beeping machines, hurried footsteps, and whispered instructions. The puppy refused to leave, curling up beside the warming bed, its fur bristling with nervous energy. Every now and then, it would nudge the incubator with its wet nose, as if reminding the staff, "Do not fail him." Then Ethan noticed something that froze him in place. Tucked beneath the baby's tiny towel was a small, folded piece of paper, soaked and almost illegible. He carefully unfolded it. Written in shaky script were 3 words, "Go, find help." His heart clenched. Maria, in her desperation, had left instructions to ensure the baby survived. Every word screamed fear, love, and determination. The weight of that message hit Ethan like a freight train. And then a new question struck him. Where had Maria gone? How had she given birth alone in the freezing night, leaving her newborn to the mercy of the world? He scanned the monitors, checked the cameras, and called security. "We need the footage from every camera in the lower garage and surrounding streets," he instructed. "If she's out there, we need to find her. Now." The puppy barked once, urgent and low, drawing Ethan's attention to the corner of the room. He followed its gaze and froze. A figure appeared on one of the monitors. A woman, barely conscious, lying in the shadows of the parking garage, stained with blood, shivering violently. The camera quality was grainy, but Ethan recognized the dark hair, the hospital wristband. Maria Alvarez. His pulse raced. He barked orders. "Security, ambulance, now, someone get me a stretcher." Nurses scrambled, phones rang incessantly, and the puppy leapt to the door, pawing at it, growling. It was as if the dog knew this next step was critical. Minutes later, paramedics arrived in a flurry of activity. The small team navigated the icy winter roads back to Mercy General. Every second without warmth or medical care could mean disaster for Maria, and Ethan felt the weight of every second pressing against his chest. Meanwhile, the baby, tiny, fragile, yet fiercely alive, clung to life in the incubator, oblivious to the chaos around him. Back in the NICU, Ethan's hands hovered over the monitors, checking the baby's heart rate, oxygen levels, and temperature. His mind raced. The hospital, the staff, the puppy, and the baby were all threads in a story that had only just begun, and one wrong move could unravel it entirely. Finally, the paramedics arrived, bringing Maria through the sliding doors. She was pale, shaking, eyes barely open. The sight of her tiny baby in the incubator drew a faint moan from her lips, but she couldn't speak. Bloodied and weak, she was a ghost of the vibrant young woman admitted only hours earlier. The puppy pressed against her leg, tail wagging weakly, as if reassuring her that the worst was over. Ethan knelt beside her, whispering, "You're going to be okay. He's going to be okay. We're not letting anything happen to either of you." Maria's eyes fluttered closed again, exhaustion and pain overwhelming her. The baby coughed and struggled, fighting fiercely for every breath, tiny hands flexing weakly in Ethan's grasp. The puppy whimpered softly, nuzzling the incubator. Everyone in the room held their breath. Ethan realized the gravity of what had just happened. In the span of one night, a homeless woman had given birth alone. A puppy had delivered her child to safety, and now 2 lives hung precariously in the balance. He looked at the small dog, muddy, exhausted, but alert, and whispered under his breath, "You saved him." The puppy barked sharply, almost in response. And then, from the rear of the NICU, a nurse called out, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and fear. "Doc, the baby's heart rate is dropping again." Ethan froze. He looked down at the tiny chest rising and falling in ragged, uneven rhythm. The monitors beeped urgently, machines sounding warnings. Every second mattered now. The life of the baby and perhaps Maria rested on the edge of a knife. The puppy sat up straighter, ears perked, eyes locked on Ethan. It was as if it knew what was coming next, and it would not leave his side, not for a moment. The fight had only begun. The sirens faded, replaced by the rhythmic beeps of monitors and the quiet shuffle of nurses. Dr. Ethan Cole wheeled Maria's stretcher into a private ICU room, the bright overhead lights catching on the blood-soaked hospital gown she had worn. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven gasps. Her dark hair clung to her pale forehead, matted with sweat and dried blood. The puppy sat at her feet, tail stiff, eyes darting between the gurney and Ethan, as if urging him to act faster. Ethan crouched beside her. "Maria," he said gently, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. Her eyelids flickered, revealing wide, terrified eyes. The voice that had been so fragile when she'd arrived was now barely a whisper. "Baby," she croaked, her lips trembling. Where is he?" Ethan's chest tightened. He knew the moment had come to tell her what had happened. "He's safe," Ethan said, his voice steady but his heart pounding. "He's alive. You did well. He's in the NICU, warm, breathing. And there's someone who helped him, someone very special." Maria's eyes followed Ethan's gaze. The puppy stepped forward as if understanding her question before she even asked it. Maria reached out a trembling hand, pressing it gently against the dog's head. Tears streaked her face. You brought him," she whispered. The puppy whined softly in response. Ethan nodded. "He found your baby, Maria. He dragged him here through the parking garage and the lobby, alone. He saved him." A silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft whimpers of the dog and the occasional beep from the monitors. Maria's hands clenched into fists over the thin hospital blanket covering her. I didn't know what else to do," she said. Her voice trembled and a shudder ran through her body. "I was scared. I thought I might lose him. I didn't want him to die. So I told him to go. I told him to find help." Ethan's throat tightened. He had seen many mothers in crises, many desperate choices, but the courage it must have taken to trust a small, trembling puppy with the life of her child was extraordinary. He could feel the weight of her fear, the raw intensity of a mother's instinct that refused to fail even when her own body had no strength left. Where were you?" Ethan asked gently. "How did this happen?" Maria closed her eyes, trying to summon the memory without passing out from the pain that still lanced her abdomen. I went to the garage. I didn't want anyone to see. I didn't have anyone to help. He came so fast, my water broke. I delivered him myself. I tied him in a bag to keep him warm." Her voice cracked. "And I told him to go. Find help, please. Don't let him die." She opened her eyes, fear and exhaustion written across her face. Ethan nodded, suppressing a lump in his throat. The details were horrifying. A homeless, unassisted woman giving birth in freezing conditions, alone in a parking garage. Yet against all odds, her baby was alive, wrapped in blankets and warmed by the puppy's insistence. Ethan's gaze flicked to the monitors, where the baby's tiny chest rose and fell steadily now, and a small, trembling hope began to bloom. But Ethan's relief was cut short by a harsh reality. The medical team had begun preliminary scans on Maria. Her vitals were unstable. Blood loss had been severe. She was hypothermic, exhausted, and on the verge of shock. The doctors administered fluids, oxygen, and pain management, but every moment felt fragile. Ethan felt the tension spike in his chest. One misstep now, and he could lose both mother and child. Meanwhile, the puppy remained steadfast, sitting beside her bed, tail wagging faintly, ears perked, eyes never leaving her face. Nurses whispered about the loyalty, almost human intelligence, radiating from the small dog. "It's like he knows," one nurse murmured. "Like he's making sure she's safe, too." Ethan gave a small nod, though he didn't speak. He had no words that could encompass the sheer, raw intensity of the scene. The NICU was quiet for a brief moment, allowing Ethan to focus. He leaned over the puppy, brushing his hand across the small, muddy back. "You've done enough, little guy. Let us help now," he said softly. But the puppy gave a soft growl, barely audible, and pressed its nose into the thin blanket covering the baby, as if confirming, "I'm staying until they're both safe." Outside the ICU room, the security team began reviewing footage from the parking garage. Ethan approached, glancing at the screens. What he saw made him freeze. The grainy footage revealed Maria stumbling through the icy lot, clutching her stomach, her breath shallow. She collapsed beside her car, hidden in shadows. The puppy appeared from nowhere, dragging a small bundle, her newborn wrapped in layers, toward the hospital entrance. Ethan's pulse quickened. The sheer intelligence and bravery of the puppy was staggering. It navigated through cars, puddles, and stairs, never wavering, never faltering. He knew instinct alone could not have guided the animal through such complex paths. There had to have been prior training or something extraordinary at work. And then a chilling thought struck him. Maria had been missing for hours. If the puppy had not intervened, the baby might not have survived. And what about Maria herself? What if someone had seen her stumble? What if the conditions outside had killed her before help could arrive? Ethan's stomach turned. The line between life and death was thinner than he had ever realized. He returned to the room where Maria's eyes opened slightly, focusing on the puppy. He's okay?" she asked weakly. Ethan nodded, his heart tightening. "Yes, he's breathing, strong now. You did everything right. He's alive because of your courage and this little hero." Maria reached out, touching the puppy's head. The small animal nuzzled her hand, tail wagging faintly. A single tear escaped her eye. "Thank you," she whispered, voice broken. But the relief was temporary. Ethan could see it in the monitors, tiny fluctuations in the baby's oxygen levels, faint irregularities that threatened the fragile life teetering on the edge. Nurses adjusted equipment, administering medications, increasing the incubator's warmth. Every breath mattered. Every heartbeat mattered. And then, in the midst of controlled chaos, Ethan noticed a tiny movement beneath the blanket covering the baby, a faint wriggling, a minuscule hand attempting to reach outward. The instinctive determination of the newborn mirrored that of the puppy. Both clung to life with unwavering resolve against impossible odds. Ethan's chest tightened. He had never witnessed such raw willpower, the perfect convergence of human and animal instinct. But even as hope swelled in his chest, the lingering questions gnawed at him. Who had left Maria alone in the freezing parking garage? Why hadn't anyone noticed her absence earlier? Could this have been intentional? Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. The answers were waiting somewhere, hidden in shadows, on icy pavement, in the echo of footsteps that no one had heard. The puppy whimpered softly, nudging the baby with its nose, breaking Ethan from his thoughts. He looked down, meeting the small, intelligent eyes of the dog. Somehow, he knew this story wasn't over. The events of the night were a warning and a promise. Danger might still be lurking, but courage and a little hero had arrived first. Ethan straightened, taking a deep breath. He needed to find Maria's full story. He needed to uncover what had forced her to such desperation. And he knew that the answers would shock everyone, even more than the sight of a puppy dragging a baby through hospital doors. The puppy barked once, low and urgent, and Ethan realized it was time to follow the trail. The night had left scars, secrets, and questions that demanded answers. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, the truth waited, ready to change everything. The rear stairwell of Mercy General Hospital smelled of damp concrete and rust, carrying the faint tang of exhaust from the garage below. Dr. Ethan Cole, paramedics, and 2 nurses descended quickly, the small puppy darting ahead like a scout, paws slipping on the slick steps but never faltering. In its determined stride, Ethan saw an intelligence he couldn't explain, an instinctive drive to reach something vital. His chest tightened. Every heartbeat echoed the urgency of what lay ahead. At the bottom, the garage was vast and dimly lit, filled with shadows cast by flickering overhead fluorescents. Cars gleamed in patches of reflected light, and the cold winter air cut through the concrete like a knife. Ethan's heart sank. There, huddled against a pillar, was Maria. She was pale and trembling violently, soaked in blood that had dried and crusted over her gown. Her hair clung to her face, streaked with dirt and sweat. She barely lifted her head as Ethan knelt beside her. The puppy pressed itself against her chest, whining softly, nudging her arm as if urging her to respond. Her eyes flickered, revealing the fear and exhaustion of a woman who had fought every second to survive. I couldn't, I did," she whispered, voice cracking. Her words trailed off as she clutched at the towel-wrapped bundle lying nearby. Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. The baby, Maria's son, was small, fragile, and bundled in a soaked towel, but alive. The paramedics moved swiftly, covering her with blankets, lifting her onto a stretcher with the care of people handling delicate porcelain. Ethan adjusted his gloves, his eyes never leaving the tiny bundle. "We need her stabilized immediately," he instructed. "Oxygen, fluids, rapid transport to ICU. Every second counts." Maria's body shook as she tried to sit upright, weak and disoriented. My baby," she croaked, reaching for the bundle, but the puppy growled softly, nudging her hand gently as if to say, "Stay still. Let them help." Ethan swallowed hard. The devotion in that small dog's eyes was almost human. As the paramedics carried Maria toward the ambulance, Ethan examined the surrounding area. The floor of the garage was slick with patches of ice, dotted with puddles reflecting the flickering lights above. Blood stains led from a darker corner of the structure, trailing into a tunnel beneath the lower level. Ethan followed the trail briefly, noting each footprint and skid mark. Whoever, or whatever, had been here before them had left a story etched in red and shadow. Ethan's mind raced. Maria had delivered her baby alone in the freezing night with no one to assist. She had cut the umbilical cord herself, bundled the baby, and somehow convinced a puppy to carry her child through icy steps, stairwells, and the hospital doors. The courage required was unimaginable. He shook his head slightly. "How did anyone survive that?" he murmured. The puppy ran ahead again, slipping slightly but recovering, its small body a blur of muddy determination. It had not only found help, it had chosen the safest path, avoided obstacles, and never faltered. Nurses whispered in awe. "It's like he knew exactly where to go," one murmured. Ethan nodded silently. He didn't have the words to capture the miracle he was witnessing. The ambulance siren wailed as it pulled away, carrying Maria and the baby. Ethan followed on foot to meet them inside the hospital doors. Inside, the NICU staff were already prepared, incubators warmed, monitors checked, and emergency protocols in place. The puppy padded alongside Ethan, whining softly, alert to every sound, every movement. Its devotion was unshakable. Inside the NICU, Ethan watched as the baby was placed into a pre-warmed incubator, tubes and monitors connected carefully. The tiny chest rose and fell with ragged rhythm, each movement a fragile testament to life. Nurses adjusted oxygen and temperature, giving the baby the best chance to survive. Ethan's eyes never left Maria as she was wheeled toward a private ICU room. For a moment, time seemed to pause. Outside, the city carried on, oblivious to the miracle that had just arrived within its walls. Inside, life clung by the narrowest margin, held together by human skill, motherly courage, and the loyalty of a small, muddy puppy. Ethan knelt beside the incubator, brushing his gloved hand across the baby's tiny arm. "You're safe now," he whispered. "You fought hard." The puppy whined, pressing against the incubator as if affirming his words. He looked back at Maria, lying pale and trembling, her eyes closed in exhaustion. "We're going to save you too," Ethan promised softly. The paramedics checked her vitals. Her heart rate was weak, blood pressure low, breathing shallow. "She's stable for now," one said, "but she's barely hanging on." Ethan nodded. He could see every bruise, every cut, every sign of the night's ordeal. He felt a lump in his throat. This young woman alone had survived something unimaginable. Hours passed as nurses and doctors worked tirelessly, stabilizing Maria while monitoring the baby. The puppy remained by the incubator, curled at the foot of Maria's bed when she was finally moved into ICU. Every so often, it would nuzzle the tiny blanket covering the baby, eyes wide and watchful. Ethan felt a strange mix of awe and disbelief. The events of the night had been terrifying, miraculous, and almost impossible. And yet, even in this fragile calm, questions lingered like shadows. Who had abandoned Maria in the garage? Was this a tragic accident or something more sinister? The blood trail, the darkness, the isolation, all pointed to danger. Ethan made a mental note to review security footage carefully. There had to be answers somewhere, hidden in those grainy images, waiting to reveal the truth. The puppy whimpered softly, drawing Ethan's gaze. Its eyes seemed almost human, filled with worry, intelligence, and unshakable loyalty. It had done what no one else could. It had ensured the baby's survival. Ethan felt a swell of gratitude and disbelief. This small creature had navigated the shadows, the cold, the danger, all for a tiny human life. Suddenly, a nurse called out, her voice tense. "Doctor, the baby's oxygen levels are dropping again." Ethan dashed to the incubator. The monitors beeped urgently, tiny readings flashing red. He leaned close, adjusting the tubes, the incubator heat and oxygen levels. The baby's chest heaved violently, then steadied, each breath a hard-won victory. The puppy barked once, low and warning, as if acknowledging the near disaster. Ethan's hands shook slightly as he checked the monitors again. The baby was alive. Maria, fragile and trembling, was alive. And the puppy had carried hope into the hospital when no one else could. He looked down at the small animal and whispered, "You're a hero." The puppy tilted its head, as if understanding the words, and pressed its wet nose against the incubator. Even as relief began to seep in, Ethan knew the night was far from over. Questions about Maria's circumstances, her sudden disappearance, and the mysterious events leading to the garage still demanded answers. Danger might still be lurking unseen in the shadows of the city. And the story, the full, terrifying, miraculous story, had only just begun to unfold. The puppy whined softly, curling up at the foot of the incubator, eyes alert. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. This small creature had done the impossible, but the night's events left him with one gnawing, undeniable truth. No one had survived this alone, and someone or something had been watching. Outside, the city stirred to life. Inside, Maria and her newborn clung to life, and a small, muddy puppy kept vigil. Every second counted. Every heartbeat mattered. And somewhere beyond the hospital walls, the consequences of the night's events waited to catch up with them. Ethan took a deep breath and whispered under his breath, "We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise." The puppy barked once, soft but determined, as if affirming that promise. And Ethan realized he wasn't just fighting to save lives anymore. He was fighting to uncover the truth hidden in shadows, blood, and ice. The NICU was a controlled chaos of beeping monitors, humming ventilators, and the low murmur of medical staff coordinating rapidly. Dr. Ethan Cole stood over the incubator, hands steady but mind racing. Every tiny fluctuation in the baby's vitals sent a jolt through him. The newborn's chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven rhythm, each breath a victory carved from the edge of disaster. The puppy sat beside the incubator, eyes wide, body rigid, as if sensing the danger lurking in every weak heartbeat. Maria's room was equally tense. A team of surgeons and nurses worked tirelessly to stabilize her, administering blood transfusions, monitoring her vitals, and fighting the effects of severe blood loss. Every movement was calculated, precise, yet the unpredictability of human fragility made each second feel like walking a tightrope. Ethan had never felt the weight of responsibility so acutely. 2 lives, born within hours of each other, hung by the thinnest threads. Hours passed like minutes. The newborn struggled, tiny limbs flexing with instinctive determination. Ethan adjusted the oxygen, gently massaged the infant's limbs, and whispered words of encouragement. though he knew the baby could not understand. Yet, in that room, with machines whirring and staff moving like clockwork, the line between life and death was a palpable force pressing on everyone present. The puppy whimpered, nudging the incubator, tail stiff, ears perked. Nurses laughed softly through their anxiety. "I swear this dog knows exactly what's happening," one whispered. Ethan smiled faintly, though his heart remained tight. It wasn't just instinct, it was loyalty, and something almost otherworldly in its timing and awareness. Suddenly, a monitor beeped aggressively. Oxygen saturation dropped sharply. Ethan's pulse raced. "Increase oxygen, check for obstruction. Let's move now." He adjusted the ventilator, wiped condensation from the tiny mask, and held his breath. The newborn coughed weakly, a tiny, rasping sound that filled the room with unbearable tension. Every staff member froze for a heartbeat, then worked in synchronized motion to stabilize him. In Maria's room, the struggle was equally fierce. Her vitals had plummeted again. Blood pressure dangerously low, heart rate irregular, oxygen levels faltering. A nurse shouted, "Doctor, she's crashing." Ethan's stomach dropped. He ran from the NICU to her room, eyes scanning the monitors, hands already reaching for the nearest IV line. Surgeons were on alert, working rapidly to replace lost fluids and maintain circulation. The puppy followed, weaving between Ethan's legs, whimpering anxiously. It pressed against Maria's stretcher, nudging her weak hand, tail wagging faintly but with unmistakable urgency. Ethan felt a strange comfort in its presence. The puppy had been part of this fight from the beginning, and somehow its determination gave him strength. Minutes felt like hours. Maria groaned softly, gripping the edges of the stretcher as if holding on for life itself. Her breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible, and Ethan could see the fear reflected in the eyes of every nurse in the room. He knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Stay with me, Maria. You've fought this far, you're stronger than you think. Just a little longer." Outside, the sounds of winter traffic faded behind the insulated walls of the hospital. Inside, life and death danced in delicate balance. The newborn's chest rose and fell, stabilizing under the intense care of the NICU staff, but every beat was a reminder that survival was not guaranteed. Maria's body was similarly fragile, each breath a defiance of fate itself. Then, almost simultaneously, two alarms blared. The newborn's oxygen saturation dropped again, while Maria's heart rate spiked erratically. Ethan's mind raced, assessing priorities, delegating tasks. Nurses adjusted machines, administered medications, and kept communication sharp and precise. Yet through it all, the puppy remained a constant presence, nudging, whining softly, watching, alert. Its devotion was palpable. "Doc," shouted one of the nurses. "She's responding. Vitals are rising." Ethan exhaled, relief mingling with tension. Maria's skin regained some color, her breathing deepened slightly. The team continued working, ensuring her body held steady. At the same time, the NICU monitor beeped a steady rhythm, slow but stable for the baby. Ethan allowed himself a brief glance at the puppy. Its ears twitched, eyes never leaving the incubator. He whispered almost to himself, "You've done more than anyone could imagine. You saved them both." The puppy tilted its head, letting out a soft, victorious bark. In that small sound was the acknowledgement of survival, of a battle fought against impossible odds. Even as relief began to take hold, Ethan's mind could not rest. There were still unanswered questions. Who had left Maria in the garage? Had someone been watching? Was this a tragic accident or a deliberate act? The blood stains, the shadows, the solitary struggle, it all pointed to a story that went beyond chance. Ethan knew that uncovering the truth was now as urgent as saving lives. Hours dragged on as both mother and child stabilized further. Maria was moved to a recovery bed where she was wrapped in warm blankets, still trembling but alive. The newborn, pink and breathing steadily, remained in the incubator, tiny fingers flexing weakly against the blanket. Ethan watched, exhausted but vigilant. Every life saved tonight was a testament to courage, determination, and an unlikely little hero with muddy paws. The puppy curled at the foot of Maria's bed, eyes alert, ears flicking with every movement in the room. Nurses smiled softly, whispering about its loyalty and intelligence. "I've never seen anything like it," one said. Ethan nodded, though the weight of the night pressed heavily on him. Finally, a brief calm settled over the NICU. Both lives were no longer in immediate danger. Ethan allowed himself to sit for a moment, glancing between mother, child, and puppy. He felt awe, gratitude, and an overwhelming sense of the fragile beauty of life. And yet, even in this moment of relief, he knew the story wasn't over. The puppy let out a soft whine and nudged the incubator once more. Ethan leaned down, brushing its fur. "You've earned your rest," he whispered. But the dog remained vigilant, eyes bright, as if to remind him that this night's ordeal had been only the beginning. As the team left the room briefly to grab supplies, Ethan stepped into the corridor. He ran through the events of the night in his mind: the abandoned garage, the frozen streets, the miraculous instinct of the puppy, Maria's courage, the baby's fight for life. Somewhere in those shadows, somewhere in that dark, cold world outside, answers awaited. And Ethan knew that discovering them would reveal truths far stranger and more harrowing than anyone could imagine. The puppy barked softly, and Ethan smiled despite the tension. Its loyalty had been unwavering, its courage undeniable. But the question that lingered in every heartbeat, in every second of the long, tense night, remained: who had forced Maria to the edge of death? And would anyone else have survived the night without a little hero by their side? Ethan knew that the battle for survival had been won for now. But the fight to uncover the full story, to understand the danger that had stalked Maria and her newborn, was just beginning. And in that moment, as the winter dawn light filtered faintly through the hospital windows, he felt the weight of the night press upon him. The lives saved, the lives almost lost, and the shadows still waiting to reveal the truth. The puppy barked once more, small and determined, as if to say, "I am here. We survived. But the story isn't over." Ethan nodded to himself, heart still racing, and stepped back into the room, ready for whatever came next. The hospital waiting room was nearly silent, a stark contrast to the chaos of the NICU and ICU. Outside the glass doors, the pale winter light of early morning filtered through the frosted windows, casting long, somber shadows across the chairs. Relatives and staff lingered in hushed groups, but inside, Ethan felt the full weight of exhaustion pressing down on him. Both Maria and her newborn were clinging to life, and the minutes stretched like hours. The small puppy sat loyally at the foot of the incubator, tail curled, eyes sharp and watchful. It had spent hours standing vigil, never leaving, never sleeping, seemingly aware of the fragility of the lives in its care. Nurses whispered in awe, occasionally leaning down to offer soft pats, but the dog's attention never wavered. "I've never seen an animal like this," one murmured. Ethan nodded silently, grateful for the creature that had delivered hope when no one else could. Inside the ICU, Maria's body had stabilized somewhat. Blood pressure rising slowly, vitals steadying, but she was still pale, shivering from exhaustion and trauma. Ethan knelt beside her, checking monitors and adjusting blankets. "Stay with me, Maria," he whispered. "You're doing so well. The hardest part is over." She blinked weakly, confusion and fear clouding her gaze. "My baby," she whispered, voice trembling. "Is he okay?" Ethan smiled faintly, squeezing her hand gently. "He's alive, strong, fighting for every breath. You did everything right. You saved him." Tears welled in Maria's eyes, and her lips trembled as emotion overcame her exhaustion. She tried to speak again, but only a faint whimper emerged. Ethan brushed her damp hair from her forehead, offering quiet reassurance. Suddenly the puppy barked sharply, ears pricked. Ethan looked up. The small creature was staring intently at the ICU doors. Its gaze was fixed, almost pleading, as if urging someone forward. Seconds later, a nurse approached, voice tense but hopeful. "Doctor, he's ready. We can let her see the baby now if you think she's stable enough." Ethan nodded. A plan formed quickly. The baby, now slightly more robust, was transferred to a mobile incubator. The puppy hopped ahead, waddling beside the incubator, tail wagging faintly but eyes locked on Maria's face. It was a procession of hope, fragile, tentative, but unstoppable. Maria's eyes widened as she saw the incubator approaching. A tiny hand extended, attempting to reach for her son through the glass. Ethan guided her gently, supporting her trembling frame. She leaned closer, lips brushing the plexiglass, her eyes filling with tears. The baby's tiny hands flexed weakly in response, fingers curling as if trying to touch his mother. The connection, immediate and profound, sent a wave of emotion through everyone in the room. The puppy pressed its nose against the incubator, whining softly. It had delivered the child to safety, guided the baby to warmth and care, and now it watched the first reunion with unwavering vigilance. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. It had been a night of terror, courage, and unlikely heroism, but this moment, this fragile, tender reunion, felt almost sacred. Maria whispered brokenly, words fragmented by exhaustion. My baby, you're alive." Her tears fell freely, and she traced her fingers along the outside of the incubator. The baby's tiny gaze seemed to follow her movements, a mirrored recognition that defied explanation. Nurses dabbed at her eyes, but no one attempted to speak. They all sensed the profound gravity of the scene. Ethan's attention was drawn to the puppy. It had been her guide, protector, and the force that brought hope when human hands could not. Now it stood guard, still alert, still vigilant. For a brief moment, the intensity of the night, the terror of the garage, and the desperation of Maria's ordeal were replaced by a quiet, poignant triumph. But even in that triumph, tension remained. The baby coughed softly, tiny body flexing, and Ethan checked the monitors. Vital signs stable, heart rate steady. Yet he knew the night had not truly ended. Maria's trauma, the unexplained events in the parking garage, and the unanswered questions still lingered. Someone had abandoned Maria in the freezing lot. Someone had forced this night of terror. The puppy had saved them, but for how long would the threat remain? Minutes later, Maria's voice grew slightly stronger. I told him to go, the puppy, he saved my baby," she whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. Ethan nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "Yes, he did, a little hero." Maria smiled faintly, looking down at the puppy. Thank you for everything." The dog whined softly, pressing its small body against her knee as if acknowledging her gratitude. Despite the relief, Ethan could not shake the sense of foreboding. The parking garage, the blood trail, and the cold streets were still out there, silent witnesses to the night's terror. Questions remained. Had Maria been watched? Was someone still nearby? Why had she been left to deliver alone? The truth, he knew, could be more terrifying than anyone imagined. The puppy barked once, insistent, drawing Ethan's attention. It was almost as if it sensed the answers were close. Ethan followed the animal's gaze toward the hospital monitors, where security footage of the garage awaited review. The grainy images revealed Maria's collapse, the careful dragging of the baby by the small puppy, and the terrifying isolation of that night. Ethan felt a chill. Every frame of footage added urgency to the unknown threat still lurking beyond the safety of the hospital walls. He looked back at Maria and the baby, both fragile but alive. The puppy's loyalty and courage had carried them through an impossible ordeal. Ethan felt a deep respect for the unassuming creature that had brought hope when humans could not. Yet the questions about the night, the mystery of Maria's abandonment, and the possible danger she had escaped remained pressing. As he turned to review the footage with security, Ethan realized the night had changed him. It was no longer just a battle for life. It was a journey to uncover truth, to protect those who could not protect themselves, and to honor the courage shown in the most desperate moments. The puppy barked again, low and insistent, as if reminding him of the unfinished story. The waiting room remained silent, save for the soft whimpers of the little dog and the rhythmic beeping of machines. Outside, the city's morning had begun, oblivious to the fragile lives preserved within the hospital walls. Inside, however, hope and fear coexisted in a delicate balance, tethered by the courage of a mother, the survival instinct of a newborn, and the extraordinary loyalty of a small, muddy puppy. Ethan took a deep breath. Both mother and child were alive, a miracle against staggering odds. Yet the night's story was not complete. The questions of why Maria had been left alone, who, or what, had forced this desperate ordeal, and whether the danger had truly passed lingered in every shadow. The puppy whined softly, pressing its nose against Ethan's hand. "I know," he whispered. "I know you want answers too. We'll find them." Its tail wagged faintly, small but determined, as if affirming that promise. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself a brief moment of relief. He watched Maria's fragile hand reach toward the incubator, the baby's tiny fingers responding, the puppy lying faithfully beside them. They had survived the night, and in that survival a bond had been forged, one of courage, instinct, and unbreakable loyalty. But deep down, Ethan knew the story was far from over. The shadows of the garage, the unanswered questions, and the mysterious forces that had set this chain of events in motion would not remain hidden for long. The fight for answers, the uncovering of truth, and the protection of those who had survived were only beginning. The puppy let out a soft, determined bark, and Ethan nodded to himself. The night had been won, but the story, the full, harrowing, miraculous story, was only halfway told. By late morning, Mercy General Hospital was buzzing with activity. The news of Maria's miraculous survival had begun to ripple through the hospital staff, spreading quietly at first, then more loudly, as word of the puppy that had dragged a newborn to safety reached nurses, doctors, and administrators. Soon, whispers became questions, and questions became small crowds gathering near the NICU and ICU doors. Ethan tried to maintain order, but the energy in the hospital was electric, a mix of awe, curiosity, and disbelief. The puppy, muddy paws and all, remained perched loyally by the incubator. Its eyes followed every movement, ears flicking at each whisper or murmur of surprise. Staff joked softly about naming it Guardian. Though no one truly needed a name, the puppy had already earned legend status for its bravery and intelligence. Maria, though still fragile, had grown slightly stronger. She now rested in a private recovery room, blankets pulled tightly around her shoulders, hair damp with sweat and blood. Her eyes, heavy with exhaustion, flicked toward the incubator where her son lay. Every so often she whispered his name, lips trembling, tears forming at the edges of her eyes. Each tiny response from the baby, a twitch of a finger, a faint gasp, sent shivers through her spine. The bond between mother and child, forged in the most desperate circumstances, was raw and unbreakable. Ethan remained close, monitoring both mother and child. Every minute that passed was precious. Though Maria was improving, her body had endured trauma, blood loss, and hypothermia. Every care routine, every medication, every small adjustment could mean the difference between continued survival and catastrophe. And even as he focused on the medical side, Ethan's mind kept returning to the mysterious events outside the hospital. Who had left Maria in that freezing garage? Why had she been alone? Was there someone still watching, waiting for the next opportunity? The puppy whimpered softly, nudging Ethan's hand. "I know," he whispered. "We'll find the answers. You saved him. Now we protect them both." Its tail wagged faintly, the small creature's body tense with anticipation. Somehow, Ethan felt that the puppy understood the gravity of the situation on a level beyond instinct. A nurse approached cautiously. "Doctor, the news crews are outside," she whispered. "They've heard about the story. They want interviews, photos, attention is growing fast." Ethan's stomach twisted. He had never sought publicity, but the story was already spiraling out of control. The idea of exposing Maria, her newborn, and even the puppy to the glare of cameras felt intrusive, but there was no avoiding it now. Maria stirred slightly, opening her eyes to see Ethan's face. Are they coming?" she asked weakly, voice trembling. He nodded. "Yes, but we control what's shared. For now, focus on rest. He's safe, you're safe." She nodded faintly, tears tracking down her cheeks. He's my hero," she whispered, glancing at the puppy curled near the incubator. Ethan smiled. "Yes, he is." The hospital doors opened briefly as security guided a small media crew to the designated press area. Ethan positioned himself near the ICU and NICU doors, ensuring the staff and families were shielded from unnecessary exposure. Yet even as he maintained order, the energy in the air was electric. This was no longer just a story of survival. It was a story of courage, instinct, and miraculous intervention. The puppy's ears twitched at the sound of the cameras, but it did not move from its vigil. It had done its job once, bringing life to safety, and now it remained a guardian, a silent witness to the unfolding attention. Ethan knelt briefly, brushing his hand along its back. "You've earned this moment too," he whispered. The puppy looked up, eyes bright, then returned to its careful watch over the incubator. Suddenly, a staff member called out, "Doctor, we found something in the parking garage footage." Ethan moved quickly, following her to a monitor displaying grainy security footage. The images revealed more than just Maria's desperate journey. They showed a shadowy figure lurking near her car, watching her collapse, then retreating into the darkness. The person's face was obscured, but their presence was undeniable. Ethan's heart raced. The danger that had forced Maria into the garage, the terror she had endured alone, was not an accident. Someone had been watching, someone who had put both mother and child at risk. And now, even with the baby and Maria safe inside the hospital, the threat felt imminent, a shadow still stretching into their lives. The puppy growled softly, low and warning. Ethan froze, realizing the small creature's instincts were keyed into something even the cameras had not captured. The air in the room grew tense. Every staff member seemed to sense it. The night's events were far from over. Maria stirred, trying to sit up. Ethan helped her, supporting her trembling frame. "You need rest," he said firmly. She nodded, leaning against him weakly, eyes flicking toward the incubator. I have to see him," she whispered. He smiled softly. "You will, but we take it slowly." Hours passed, the fragile calm punctuated by tiny cries, soft whimpers from the baby, and occasional barks from the vigilant puppy. Ethan remained close, monitoring every reading, every shift in vitals. The connection between mother, child, and guardian animal was extraordinary, an unspoken bond forged in fear, courage, and love. Yet even as hope bloomed, Ethan's mind returned to the shadowy figure caught on camera. Who were they? Were they linked to Maria's past? Was the danger over, or had the night only revealed the beginning? The questions clawed at him relentlessly, reminding him that survival was only the first step in a story far larger and more complex than he had imagined. Then a nurse approached with an envelope, hand shaking slightly. "Doctor, this was left at the security desk. No one saw who brought it." Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a single, folded piece of paper, ink smudged but legible. It read, "You don't know the half of it. Watch the streets. They're not done." Ethan's chest tightened. The message was chilling. Even after the night's terror, even after the puppy's heroic intervention, the threat had not vanished. Someone had orchestrated events that forced a young mother and her newborn into near death. And now, with the message delivered, it was clear. This story had only just begun to unravel. The puppy barked again, small and insistent, nudging the incubator as if sensing the looming danger. Ethan knelt beside it, brushing a gloved hand along its back. "We'll protect them," he whispered. "I promise." Its eyes shone with intelligence, alert and unwavering, as if affirming the vow. Maria reached toward the incubator again, her trembling hand hovering over the glass. The baby's tiny fingers flexed in response, a silent, profound connection that radiated hope and resilience. Ethan watched the scene, feeling awe, gratitude, and unease in equal measure. They had survived the night, but the streets beyond the hospital walls were still filled with shadows, still hiding answers that could change everything. Outside, the city carried on in oblivion, unaware of the tiny lives that had been saved, the courage that had been displayed, and the shadows that still lingered. Inside, hope and fear coexisted, tethered by a mother's love, a newborn's determination, and the extraordinary loyalty of a small, muddy puppy. Ethan exhaled slowly, steeling himself. The story had become bigger than any one person, bigger than survival. It was now a mission: protect, uncover, and confront the shadows that had orchestrated the night's terror. The puppy barked once more, soft but determined, as if reminding him that the fight was far from over. And in that small, insistent sound, Ethan felt clarity. The heroes of this night, Maria, her newborn, and the little dog, had survived the darkness. But the light would reveal new dangers, new questions, and a truth far stranger and more harrowing than anyone could yet imagine. The hospital was unusually quiet for a Saturday morning. Outside, winter sunlight glinted off icy streets, oblivious to the storm that had passed within Mercy General's walls. Inside, Ethan Cole stood beside the incubator, eyes tracing the delicate rise and fall of the newborn's chest. Maria sat nearby, now somewhat stabilized, her hand resting gently on the glass as if she could reach through and touch him. And the puppy, muddy, small, yet fierce, stood sentinel, ears flicked forward, eyes alert to the faintest movement. Ethan had spent the past hours reviewing every frame of the parking garage footage, the envelope with its ominous message, and every whisper from security. The shadowy figure was no accident. It was deliberate, precise, and chillingly careful. Someone had followed Maria. Someone had known she was alone. Someone had almost ensured tragedy. He pulled up the security footage again, enhancing contrast, adjusting angles, squinting at each shadow. And then a subtle movement caught his eye. A gloved hand had pressed against a car door moments before Maria collapsed. The shadow didn't rush away immediately. It paused, scanning the garage, watching her struggle. Then it retreated. Whoever it was, they had studied her. They had intended to remain unseen. But Ethan now had a lead, a single detail that might unravel the mystery. The nurse beside him whispered, "Doctor, Maria is asking about the police. Should we call them?" Ethan nodded, voice tight. "Yes, we need protection for her and for the baby, and we need answers." Minutes later, uniformed officers arrived. They approached cautiously, taking in the scene. The mother, stabilized but fragile, the newborn breathing steadily in the incubator, the hospital staff tense but alert, and the puppy, small and vigilant, sitting at the foot of the incubator like a commander of its own army. Detective Laura Simmons, tall and sharp-eyed, stepped forward, scanning the ICU. "Dr. Cole," she asked, "we were notified about an incident in the hospital. Can you walk me through what happened?" Ethan recounted the events quickly, focusing on the security footage, Maria's condition, the baby's fragility, and of course, the puppy. The detective raised an eyebrow at the animal, leaning down to meet its gaze. "That's one impressive dog," she murmured. The puppy tilted its head but remained steadfast. As the officers set up to review the footage themselves, Maria's voice broke through the tension. "Detective, I think I know who did this." Her eyes, wide and fearful, searched the room. It's someone I knew, someone I trusted." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Who, Maria?" he asked gently. She took a shaky breath. "My ex, he didn't want me to have the baby. He followed me that night. I didn't think," her voice faltered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't think he'd really hurt me. I didn't know he'd wait, watch, and plan." Detective Simmons took careful notes, voice calm but firm. "We'll handle this, Maria. Right now you focus on your recovery and your baby." Maria nodded weakly, glancing toward the incubator. Her tiny son's chest rose and fell with each fragile breath. He saved him," she whispered, eyes flicking to the puppy. The animal whined softly, pressing its nose gently against the incubator. Ethan watched the scene unfold with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The night had been a nightmare, yet a miracle had emerged. A mother's courage, a newborn's determination, and an unlikely puppy's unwavering loyalty. But even as justice began to take shape, the memory of the night, the cold garage, the struggle, the fear, lingered like a shadow. The police reviewed the enhanced footage carefully, identifying the shadowy figure and tracing movements that led to a small parking lot behind an abandoned warehouse. Through cross-referencing license plates and previous reports, they quickly located the suspect, Maria's ex-boyfriend, recently released from jail, with a history of harassment and threats. His obsession with controlling Maria had escalated, culminating in the events of that night. Hours later, police arrived at the suspect's residence, executing a warrant with precision. Inside, they found evidence linking him to the garage surveillance, along with items indicating he had been tracking Maria for weeks. The officer in charge commented, "If it weren't for the dog, the baby, and Maria herself, the outcome could have been catastrophic." Back in the hospital, Maria finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Ethan watched as she held her son's tiny hand through the incubator, whispering soft words only a mother could understand. The puppy lay beside her, small chest rising and falling, tail twitching faintly. Every so often, Maria glanced at the animal, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Heroism doesn't always come in human form. Ethan finally allowed himself a breath. "You did it," he whispered softly to the puppy. "You kept them alive when no one else could. You were the hero tonight." The dog tilted its head as if understanding and nuzzled the edge of the incubator. Detective Simmons approached Ethan quietly. "You've seen a lot in this job," she said, "but this is something else. That dog, he's remarkable. Maria, she's alive because of him." Ethan nodded. "Remarkable doesn't even begin to describe it." As the day wore on, hospital staff began to understand the gravity of the events. Nurses whispered among themselves, telling new staff about the puppy who had dragged a baby to safety. Dr. Cole updated the security team, ensuring all footage and evidence were preserved for the investigation. And through it all, the small dog remained a constant presence, silent but vigilant, a guardian who had risked everything for life itself. By evening, Maria had regained enough strength to speak more freely. She thanked Ethan, the nurses, and most importantly, she knelt beside the puppy, hugging it tightly. "You saved my son," she whispered, tears streaming. The puppy licked her cheek, tail wagging faintly, its small body trembling with energy spent but courage unbroken. Ethan watched, heart full, realizing that the night had forged an unbreakable bond between mother, child, and dog. And though shadows of danger had lurked just beyond the hospital doors, the light had prevailed. Courage, loyalty, and the instinct to protect had won. Detective Simmons returned, reporting the arrest had been made. "He won't be a threat anymore," she said. Maria exhaled a shaky sigh of relief. I can finally breathe," she whispered. Her hand brushed over her son's tiny fingers. He stirred slightly, a weak but determined grasp of life, echoing the puppy's own steadfastness. Later, as the hospital began to settle into a quiet night, Ethan watched Maria and her baby through the ICU window. The tiny child slept, fragile but alive. Maria rested beside him, exhaustion heavy but peace beginning to bloom on her face. And the puppy, now curled beside the incubator, finally allowed its eyes to close briefly. The battle had been won. Life, fragile and miraculous, had triumphed. Ethan stepped back, allowing the small scene to sink in. He knew that this story, so improbable, so extraordinary, would be remembered for years. It was a tale of fear, courage, desperation, and hope. But more than that, it was a reminder that heroism can come in unexpected forms, in the most vulnerable moments, and from the most unlikely sources. As he turned to leave, Ethan whispered to himself, "You saved them all and changed everything." The small bark of the puppy echoed softly, almost in agreement. Outside, the city continued, unaware of the miracle that had unfolded within its walls. Inside, a mother, her newborn, and a small dog had survived the night, and justice, though delayed, was now on its way. And somewhere in the quiet shadow of the garage where terror had almost claimed a life, the story finally found its resolution. Courage had conquered fear, loyalty had carried life, and love, in all its forms, had prevailed.